Welcome to Captain's Log, issue 130. I've been thinking this week about social leadership as happening at the intersection of formal and social systems. So the formal system is the organization, everything you can see and own and control. The social system is what surrounds that. It's you and me, it's our tribal social structures. And within each of those systems, we have a different type of power. In general, I would argue that we're seeing a shift away from the structural organisation towards the more socially dynamic one. Hence, we need to change all sorts of other stuff around it. We need to change our models of organisational design, change our models of learning and of leadership, moving leadership out of the purely formal and structural into that intersection between the systems. Now, that's been informing my work this week. I've been working on this Culture Explorer programme. It's fun, I'm enjoying it. I've got 3 parallel cohorts going through it, and so it's giving me a chance to rapidly prototype and iterate the work. And this week's been looking at power, so I've been thinking about culture, about social leadership, leadership at the intersection, and about the landscape of power that we inhabit and how those types of power intersect. So, formal power held in contract, held in hierarchy, system, process, and through the consensus of the organization is a backstop. It frames and contextualizes everything else. But our social authority, held in reputation, earned over time, is different. It sort of flows around it. And we can start to think about, how does this power intersect? So when your reputational authority is alongside your formal authority, do they amplify each other? Do they just operate in different contexts? Or do they kind of bounce off in random directions? One of the thoughts I was working on with one of those groups was thinking about power by consensus. It made me think about the bravery and tragedy of the protests in Iran at the moment, the headscarf protests, often young women, girls, standing up to authority and being attacked and beaten for their willingness to defy a system. Now, it's interesting because the police, or in this case a religious police, is an instance of a state-sanctioned violence. Policing is always state-sanctioned violence. It essentially says if you are an officer, you can use violence without being prosecuted as long as you stay within that formal structure. So policing is a state-sanctioned model of violence. But when people willingly stand up to it, they remove the consensus for that power at great personal risk. But by doing so, they can change the narrative of power that surrounds them. And that is interesting, the way the system is being changed by confronting the narrative of power. You might be able to hear the baby in the background. She's had a busy week, first days at nursery this week. So she's sharing her protest at the change in circumstance. So thinking about the landscape of power within the system is valuable, because we can think, what power do I need? What power do I hold? Because of course, people with formal power, it's very clear what power they hold, but anybody can hold social authority. So as we think about culture, we all have a role to play. That ties into the quiet leadership work of leadership in the smallest of actions. In quiet leadership, we talk about self and system. So how do I relate to the system? Because systems are monumental, but individuals are deeply authentic. And like individually, you can't change the system unless your effort ties into that narrative of power and dominant narrative of structure. So of course, it's no coincidence that social movements often tip on the right individual at the right time within the right narrative tipping over. So the tragic deaths in Iran are also part of the evolution of the narrative. Within our organizations, culture is an aggregated phenomena. It's a group social phenomena of the actions of every individual. So whilst we may feel powerless, we actually carry a consensus type of power. So, that to me is why culture is so interesting. It's very hard to define it in any way beyond how you act today. And how I act today influences how you act today, but how you act today can limit and constrain how I react, not deliberately and not malignantly, but because we tend to move towards conforming. So we can end up with a culture which is simply not brave or bold enough. So that's been what's been kicking around in my head this week. Aside from that, it's been a week for The Humble Leader. The book is ready to go, the Kickstarter book, and everybody that backed it, I'm incredibly grateful. I took this Kickstarter path for The Humble Leader. So this week I've been writing and dedicating and numbering and illustrating hundreds and hundreds of copies of The Humble Leader. I've had Rich and Sam have been helping with the wrapping of all these. It's all ready to go. There's going to be hundreds going out the door today. I think the rest will go out at the beginning of next week. I'm excited to get this work in the world, but also I'm really conscious it won't be for everyone. It's very short. It's like 3,000 words. It's a guided reflection on humility in leadership. And for me, it really feels like kind of the sharp edge of working out loud. I shared one of the preview copies with somebody, and he said, "Oh, yeah, I love this work because it's really brave," which sort of terrified me because I was like, well, I don't know if it's meant to be brave. That implies it might catch fire and burn, and it may. People may not like it. I'm very conscious of that. It's always nice when people say they like something, but this work is not. It's not answers. It does draw on the research from Quiet Leadership, but it is essentially my reflection shared in a structure of a guided reflection for others. So we'll see how it goes. I was talking last night with my friend Say. We're starting work on the Learning Science Guidebook, and we talked about that. How are we going to work together? What are we going to do? And as we did that, we were trying to define the audience. Who are we aiming this at? What tone of voice will we use? What stance will we take? How will we collaborate to do it? I don't know a lot of that stuff for The Humble Leader. It's an example of working out loud for me. You write something, you work on it. That book has been in progress. It's iterated over about 8 years. And I'll put it out in the world. It's just an artifact. And sometimes I say, when you publish something, it's like the perfect text of what I thought yesterday. So, my thinking goes on, and I hope it will act as a space or provocation. Even for people who don't like it, maybe it's even then still a provocation for them to at least think about what they do like and what they do want. So The Humble Leader has been a big thing for me this week, and it will launch next week. The public version, the full release of the book will be next week. Finally, what else is going on? Quiet Leadership. I'm going to guide one more cohort through the Quiet Leadership journey this year. I'll put the details in the text below. I am lining up some cohorts for next year, but there's one more chance to make that Quiet Leadership journey. It's a 4-week journey exploring humility, kindness, fairness, and grace. I think I'll have guided 12 groups through it this year. A few thousand people have gone through it. I'm aiming to offer even more next year. I really enjoy this work, and I have run the first prototype group through the new version of this journey. There's a second chapter. I'm not sure if I'm going to develop that into a book or indeed run it more widely. I may do, but I'm very conscious that I got very lucky with Quiet Leadership. I sometimes describe it like this. I think I found the simplicity in that work. Normally, you have to get bogged down in complexity to get to simplicity, but the first chapter was simple. And as I'm writing this second chapter of it, I'm conscious it lacks some of that simplicity, and I'm having to decide if that is just because I haven't worked at it enough yet, or if it's because that idea is simple and it doesn't need more complexity around it. So we'll see. Again, it's kind of like part of working out loud. So that's it. That's what's been going on in my world this week. Next week's going to be the public launch of The Humble Leader. It's going to be focused on some of the writing around learning science, and we'll see where we go from there. Okay, thanks for your interest and support around my work. I hope you're enjoying the new Substack site and this format for the Captain's Log. I'm loving Substack at the moment. It's really one of my favorite platforms. Have a great weekend. See you next week.